Maureen Lipman's portrayal of a problematic problem-page columnist in the late 70s sitcom Agony really started her telephone ringing with offers of parts which over 30 years have ranged through musicals including Oklahoma, a one-woman show as the entertainer Joyce Grenfell, and Roman Polanski's Oscar-winning movie The Pianist. Lipman also still rings bells for a commercial in which she tried to get other people's telephones buzzing, and for several best-selling books, in which she often described her home life with her husband Jack Rosenthal, one of the greatest TV dramatists, whose plays included The Evacuees and Bar Mitzvah Boy. After Jack's death in 2004, she completed a book he was writing, and has continued to be one of Britain's most recognisable comic talents. In one of the pieces you wrote, you described being asked to sum yourself up by a newspaper in fewer than 15 words. And actually you did it in 8. Can you remember what they were?
No. Was one of them underwired?
She told everything and revealed nothing with laughs. Not bad.
It's true.
But the paradox there is that you appear to have told us everything, don't you? Because there are 6-7 books in which you seem to have written every detail of your life. But it's partial exposure.
Well, you know, I'd love there to be more to expose. You know, if I had got a Tug of Love child or a few What a Scorcher t-shirt or, you know, some real skeletons in the cupboard, then probably I would censor them, but I would probably talk about them. And there's not that much, but you know, I am creating a sort of a person who is, you know, scatty and very accessible and slightly sort of in her dotage. And yeah, that's not an untrue image, but, you know, I don't go into the darker side too much, the, you know, savage bitchery and the shrewd, you know, sort of one-upmanship and the game. I mean, I don't go into that too much because I'm sort of writing it as it's happening, really. And if you go out at my stage of life, after 41 years of being in this business that there's apparently no business like, then your face is going to lead to things happening to you. Always people are going to come up and say, oh, don't see you on the telly much anymore. Or they've got a beef. And that tends to be slightly darker.
Most of the time you're writing about yourself, you were writing about the comedy of marriage, of a long, happy marriage. And then more recently it's been being single again.
Do you know, I haven't really written about it because, you know, for the first 3 years I just worked and I was fine. I was never lonely because, Christ, give me a bit of loneliness. Sometimes my house is like Grand Central Station. It is, as somebody said, being a widow, you are a refugee in a strange country where you don't know the rules. People tell you how to, you know, oh, you'll be angry for 3 months and then you'll be depressed for 4, you know, balderdash. You know, you will be as you are. And if you're the sort of person I am, you know, you'll channel it or you'll sublimate it and you'll do the really sad bit, drip, 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 over 3.5 years, and not in public. I actually got, you know, I finished Jack's book. He wrote a book which was an autobiography, but it was a screenplay format, which is the only way he knew how to write. And I tried to finish it in his style, as opposed, you know, in other words, as a screenplay. And I think I wrote one very good scene, which was Jack being endlessly bothered by my late mother, who died 6 months before he did. So I tried to reproduce the idea of Jack alone at work and my mother thinking that he was some ne'er-do-well who just sat and stared out the window all day. But I knew that if I was going to go on chat shows and literary festivals, that I was going to get very upset. It was 2 years after or something, and it was very raw. So I went to Paul McKenna and I said, hypnotise me so that I don't cry on telly. And it worked. And I went all around the country doing the book and I never cried, and it was just wonderful. But then I went on some breakfast television show right towards the end of the tour, and Fern Britton, who as we know is straight as a die, asked me if I heard his voice around the house, and that did it. It was quite a clever journalistic question, actually. That bypassed Paul McKenna. So I did get upset, but on the whole, no, it sort of worked, and it was fantastic. fantastic to be able to, this is really, if I could do this for every widow, to be able to go out into the world and talk to total strangers about a nice man and see them sort of slightly fall in love with him or with his memory was wonderful. And it was great therapy for me. So over the 3 years, and before I kind of in any way thought about going back into the wonderful world of dating, which I'd never been part of, it was a gradual process. What I did do, which was pretty stupid, was to go back into the wonderful world of show business too early, as I always have. God, I've been ill, and oh yes, I'll do the job.
But actors believe that it helps, don't they?
They have this weird, sinister person called Dr. Theatre who allows you to... But the unneurotic actor knows that that's not the case. The show doesn't have to go on at all, actually. Hugh Jackman, Be Still My Heart, in Oklahoma, he came out one day to sing... there's a bright golden haze on the meadow. And I sat there in the middle of the Olivier stage, churning, doing my butter, crinkled eye makeup and bits of broken veins and a Stetson on my head. And he came on. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. Oh, the corn is high, isn't it? And then he just turned to the audience and he just said, ladies and gentlemen, broad Australian, I thought I could do it today. I'm really sorry, I've got a bit of a chest infection, so I'm gonna leave you in the capable hands of Aunt Ella, the lovely Maureen Lipman, and enjoy the show. I'm really sorry. And off he went. Of course, as you can imagine, they had to get me off with a hook.
And then the understudy came on.
Well, after 15 minutes. But they did.
You were churning for 15 minutes.
Well, I was telling stories. I was saying, we got plenty better than him backstage. We got brassier ones, bigger ones, hunkier ones. So they finally came and escorted me off. My point being that I missed one performance of Oklahoma due to a migraine that I just simply couldn't top. But I've met every member of that audience. Wherever I go in the world. We came on the day you were off. I said, well, pity about the other 300 and whatever. It doesn't matter. I've just worked with Dinah Rigg recently, and I was her understudy at the National in 1970 in Jumpers. And I can hear the sound of that audience. She was big. And when they said, we regret to announce that Miss Dinah Rigg is indisposed, that groan went straight into my bones and into my marrow, and I can reproduce it in my head even now.
The National then was run by Laurence Olivier, then the most famous actor in the world, but did you audition for him?
No. And I only met him, really, when he came backstage after Tiger, the musical. And on the opening night, Sir Laurence trolled up every one of those steps at the Albury Theatre to say, well done. And it wasn't the best show in the world, as the critics would tell us the next day. But, and there was my dad in the dressing room telling Laurence Olivier how proud he must be to have me in his company. And there was I, trying to beam me up.
And most actors have a Laurence Olivier impersonation, but do you have one?
Yes, he did say something to me, and I treasure this, actually, because I got a laugh. I took over in Long Day's Journey into Night as the maid at 15 minutes' notice, one of those National Theatre things. And she was an Irish maid, and it was just really one scene with Constance Cummings, who I adored. She was a real lady of the theatre. And my last line, she let me have a drink with her, my last line was, when Tyrone came in the person of Laurence Olivier, don't be looking at me that way. If I've a drop taken, I didn't steal it. I was invited. Exit. Fine, got through it all. Then Saturday night audiences being what they are, people who think they should go to the theatre on a Saturday night on the whole, I got a round of applause as I left. Ooh, no. I thought, ooh, bad, wrong. Serious play. And then the Sir walks past the door. Darling baby girl, he says, putting his arm up there. So clever, Miss Lipman, he says. so clever, but you know we can't have that. And of course I said, no, I know. I said, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I did. I said, no, darling, you know, I turned away at a particular point and that gave it to you. He said, fine, yes, I'm still sorry. But he was the most brilliant head of a company, and there will never be a time like that again, ever. How, you know, people were promoted, people's careers were guided. You know, wonderful people like Louise Purnell just went from job to job and got better and better. We learnt everything there. I don't know where anybody learns how to act, how to have technique anymore, you know.
Maybe they don't.
Well, they don't, you know. I do. I've taken it upon myself to sort of more or less do anything that I'm offered in telly, just because, you know, at my time of life and at my stage of the profession, you know, I'm going to get a few things that drip down from Brenda, Blessing, or Julie. I'm going to get a few, but on the whole, the first person they think of for Bleak House is not going to be Maureen Lipman, let's be honest. So if an interesting cameo comes along, you know, I say yes to it. So, you know, off I go and do something. And I find that the young actors, you know, the sort of hip, streetwise, you know, they're adorable and they're lovely young people. But would it occur to them to lean over and pick up a cup and do something with it, or do a Merrill, you know? I mean, no, because they've learnt everything on television and there's no time. So you can't suddenly do something that makes you move in a different direction or pick a bit of lint off a friend. You can't, because then a director's going to say to you, sorry, we missed you there, can you just go back and do the line? So they all stand there and say the lines very naturalistically, but without much space. You know, that you have to have the courage in comedy, particularly, to pause and think.
That was tantalising. So in acting, doing a Merrill, you did some kind of gesture. So what's doing a Merrill?
Well, I don't think that's out there in the vernacular, but you know how she swaps flies and... just having the courage to take the time to think through the character's eyes. I mean, you know, if I suddenly wanted to, you know, to appear to be terribly sort of naturalistic and, you know, I don't know, just to have the nerve to take the time to sort of do the things that we do in real life and we never do in acting. Pauses are scary.
That was.
No, but that's what I mean. You know, technique. Peter Barkworth used to teach technique, I believe, at RADA, but it's a dirty word. But actually, you watch someone like the great, the Donald Sinden sort of, the real Eric Sykes. You watch what they do, and it's a really skilled form. But post Stanislavski, of course, it's probably you know, quite unfashionable to sort of do that. But what is actually happening? I always think, what's happening in a theatre when the audience laugh? What are we, the characters, doing? In that hiatus, there is nothing occurring. So, therefore, we all do a little thing when the laugh comes. You know, we don't just stand there. We all kind of pretend that life is going on. You know, you will get much more of a laugh if you turn away after you've said your line. All these little things. I don't think there's anything bad in teaching people that and saying practice. Practice what it's like pausing in the middle of the line. Practice what it's like pausing at the end of the line. And then, you know, when you come in on the hilt of a laugh, so that you know, all these things you learn through doing. And doing and doing and doing. But where do young actors go to do? Because they generally come out of some media course or the 150,000 drama schools that have sprung up and straight into the bill. And fame is either instantaneous or they go into, you know, who kills coppers, you know. But,
so when you're on set, do you try to teach them some of this?
Auntie Mo? Yeah, a bit. I don't interfere with their what they're doing, but if they were to ask me, I would proffer advice. Yes, I would. And then, you know, I mean, it makes me very critical. Both of the, you know, no actor has ever yawned. You have never seen a yawn, unless it's Big Brother. And of course, all these reality shows. Of course, how can you be that naturalistic? You can't as an actor when you're saying somebody else's lines. But you watch an actor trying to yawn, and it's absolutely... It would take so long to really yawn because we harness our breath. We need our breath to speak. So if I was to really yawn on this programme, that would be it for time. But people are always going... It's hard, but you have to find a way to simulate it or not yawn, you know.
I want to look now at how you got to that acting career and your childhood. You said something in one of your articles, which I was very struck by. You grew up in Hull. You said, I'm more shaped by being a northerner than by any other experience.
I'm very Hull, or I'm a Hullovian, and I think it has given me my humour. I mean, obviously, my dad was amusing, dry. My mother was hysterical, but didn't know why. But the biggest shape, probably, is through being... slightly outside in a minority, ethnic group. Obviously, that would really shape me because it meant I sat and watched and listened more, and often was able to. If I didn't go into assembly in the mornings, then I was able to observe.
We think we know a lot about your mother because you wrote about her so much and broadcast with her, and she was a public figure. Were you using literary license when you wrote about her, or was it a pretty accurate account of your relationship?
The malapropisms and the ingenuousness of my mum was absolutely spot on. She came to my one-woman show, and she said to me afterwards, there was a man sitting next to me, and he was writing all the way through the first half, and he never came back in the second half. So I did phone the press office and say, who was the man who left, the critic who left at the interval. And she said, I'll come back to you. And she came back and she said, no, it was so-and-so, Michael Coveney or whoever. She said, but he didn't leave. He just asked if he could have his seat changed because the woman next to him kept looking at him. And that is absolutely with that. Even as a child, before I was ever into theatre or anything, that when my brother's friends came round, whenever my mother put her face through the door and left, everyone was in fits. And she had no idea why. What I've never quite said is the extent of my impatience with her, which I am, suffer remorse till my dying day. Because, she was difficult in that with the sweetness and the ingenuity came a remarkable ability to say exactly what you don't want to hear. So, oh, Amy's not back from school. Oh, do you think she's been run over? So it did cause a lot of... And Jack, who was the most patient man on earth, was constantly... He said, Zelma, do me a favour, love. I know I look as if I'm not doing anything, but I am actually thinking, so... Could you not disturb me unless it's really important? Oh, she said, all right. And 10 minutes later, he says that he was just aware of her standing there, but not speaking, just being there. And he said, is it important, Zell? She said, I don't know. So he said, turn around, he said, what is it, love? She said, I'm just going to Brent Cross. Does this jumper go with this skirt? To Jack, who was colourblind. So it was like you were laughing, but it was with pain. It was the archetypal Jewish experience. You're laughing with pain. So, she's... I think the loss of Zelma, really, and that particular... She was a muse to us all. Amy still dines out on Zelma stories. And the loss of her...
So you, Jack and Amy have all written about her, in effect, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm. And Amy will actually... One day, Amy will write what she was, write Grandma, definitely. And I'm not looking forward to that. I don't know how I'm going to come out. Curiously enough, she was so precise. Every single thing was tabulated and written, Wednesday turned mattress, Thursday, all her phone calls. So when she died, there was absolutely nothing to do, really. It was perfect. She was so... fastidious in a way that she couldn't bear the fact that I work out of chaos. And the only thing she would say in my defence was, I don't know how she does it. She comes in and in a minute there's a meal on the table, but I don't know where it's come from because she never goes in a shop. No. So there was always this sense with her and I of that she loved Maureen Lipman, but she wasn't too keen on me. I was too like my dad, you know, sort of too whiplash and awkward and dark. And on the day, well, that programme called Who Do You Think You Are? They came to me to do the the research for a programme, and they never did it actually because I don't think they found anything particularly interesting. But they said to me, "Is anybody still alive who knows where you come from?" Because we never talked about the past ever. I didn't even know about the Holocaust till my friends learnt about it at school at the same time as me. So I said, well, I don't know, because I don't even know what my name was, whether it was changed. I don't know whether it's Russia or Lithuania or Poland. Is your mother? I said, I'll ring her and I'll ask her. So I phoned Zelma in Hull and I said, can you tell me? And, I don't know anything about that. No, I was born here. My mother was born here. So I said, well, what about Auntie Mary? Is she still alive? Oh, yes, but she lives in Leeds. I said, well, that's all right. We can, with the miracle of the telephone. Can I have her number? What about Arnold? Oh, yes, but he's a funny buggy, won't I? I said, right, can I have his number? What about your uncle in Grimsby? Well, he's there, but, I haven't talked to her. Anyway, I got a list of about 5 or 6 names of people to ring who might remember both sides of the family where they came from. The following morning, on her way to synagogue, she had a heart attack and died. Now, there is no way that wasn't part of her tidying up. Something happened whereby, because of that conversation, I was able to ring everybody up and say, Zelma's died. Because otherwise, I wouldn't have had a clue how to do it. So my accountant said, I've never seen books kept the way she kept them. So we were completely different, absolutely different. And yet, she crept into my performances, particularly in things like Eskimo Day and Cold Enough for Snow, the northern things. It was very difficult not to think Zelma.
Amy and Adam, have you been at all like her? I mean, have you been a classic Jewish mother?
Have I? No, I'm a bit too funky for that, really. I think it's not just me either. I think this generation of parents, our kids have enjoyed our company more. We don't have so much censorship. We came through the 60s. We know what it's like to smoke a joint and to have a bit of a rave, even if it's only because we heard about it. And there were no thou shalt nots. It just moved on. I mean, when I took Jack home to Hull, he was in a separate room. That was not the case with my kids growing up. We would, rightly or wrongly, I think, go to quite a big lengths not to lose the friendship of our children. Whereas in those days, there was very much that kind of, you do this, that's it, finished.
Your father is a much smaller presence in what you've written. But was that also true in your life?
Well, Dad's worked, and Dad's were very much, you wait till your father comes home, but he was a soft touch for me, really. He adored, we had a lovely relationship. And he adored Jack. I mean, he liked Jack much more than he liked me, really. But he was a difficult man.
He was a tailor as well.
He couldn't sew a button on, really, but he had a tailor's shop, and it was extremely, it was an eclectic place. It was, I have spoken about it before, but it was on Monument Bridge, which was right next to the docks, and his advert in the paper said, Maurice Lipman's shop is next to the docks. Drop in and see him sometime. And it was 2 shops knocked into one, and there was a step in between, and there was a sign which said ready-to-wear department downstairs. Well, there was neither a downstairs nor a ready-to-wear department, but that sign was being thrown away by Burton's. So he took it, and he was completely, he'd take an order down and then lose the paper. It's me, that's where I get it from. He was fantastically forgetful. In fact, when he and my mother married, she was only 19 and he was in his 30s, and he took her to the cinema one night, and it was a chick flick. And he got bored, and he went across the road to the station hotel and had a game of snooker. and came out. My mother was waiting for him outside the cinema, completely forgot he was married and went home to his mother. And that was my dad. And he was witty, he was dry, but he was very, very reserved. He didn't like you mustn't, not in public, no, don't show off, don't raise your head above the parapet. That very much that immigrant second generation. He used to say, I sometimes wonder why I'm not more courageous about things. I can never understand it when I'm sitting in a radio station with someone like Tracy Edwards, and she says, and at this point the 90-foot mast broke. What are you doing out there? Is what I want to say. Sir Ranulph, what are you doing this for? Stay home, have a cup of coffee. Read a book. But I know it's just because I don't have that gene. Why don't I have that gene? Because every time I went upstairs, my father said, go Pamela. Go slowly. Just upstairs. So he couldn't have any kind of adventure. Mind how you go. It was always that. Be careful, don't make waves. So, so one chose to be out there in a different way.
And you mentioned being excluded from assembly at school, so you were aware quite early on of Jewishness being something separate.
Yes, I had my friends during the week and my friends for the weekend. And then I tried to fuse it, and it never quite worked. But I wasn't, they didn't say assembly, no dogs, no Jews. It wasn't one of those. I could go in, and I did, because actually I had a better time when I went in. I loved all the hymns. But I suppose the thing of just having an extra string to my bow was always nice. And it still is. It's still that. I love it when people come for Friday night dinner and people who've never worn a yarmulke do. And I'm fascinated by religion generally. If I went to university, which I never did, but if I did, I would study comparative theology, because I am fascinated as to what it's there for and what it does and how the schisms within.
This is a question that I think all Jewish people in Britain and elsewhere have to address at some point. Do you think you have experienced anti-Semitism in this country?
How dare you say that? No. Have I experienced? Never as a child. I was always proud and I was always welcome. I've always felt like an English person. The only time I've experienced, I know Jack did experience it in terms of, literally stones being thrown as a kid on his way to school. My generation, we were the good guys. We'd suffered enough, so we were allowed off for a short while. Yes, I had some nasty letters when it was announced I was playing Joyce Grenfell. Yes, I met up with the lovely Lady Ranulph on Carol Stone's lawn, who told me that Jews are responsible for all the violence in the world, and that, you Jews, you're always saying next year in Jerusalem, but you never go, do you? And it was extraordinary. I've never, ever, ever come across that before. And I said to her, have you had your nose done? What? How dare you say that? Well, I assumed there was something going on that I didn't know about. But then I learned she was a Holocaust denier, so you can't call that anti-Semitism. She's just a stupid woman.
And Princess Margaret got into conversation with you once about anti-Semitism.
Well, here we are talking about it, Mark. You know what I mean? It's so... I don't suppose that if you were sitting here talking to Dame Judy, you'd get into Quakerism much. And it's not your fault. It just is somehow bigger than the sum of its parts.
Well, I would ask her about Quakerism, but there's no obvious case that I know of violence or a Holocaust against Quakers, so it does arise. And, anti-Semitism is a reality, isn't it?
It is a rising reality, yes. It's coming back into being fashionable. And one of the reasons it's coming back into being fashionable is because they're taking the grounds, they're talking about Israel. They're talking about the Jewish state. There are 63 Christian states. There are 84 Muslim states. There's one Jewish state that we're allowed to have, And of course, if you put your money where your mouth is, as I do, then there's going to be people, you're going to be slightly unpopular, and there are people who tell me not to, but Jews have to be against injustice. It's part of the Torah. We have to speak up if we see it. It's not just for us, it's for, and I don't know why I do it, really, because the more I do it, the less likely I'm ever to be offered Bleak House or a Dickens, or a classic, or would you like to play? I've just done the Cherry Orchard. Now I am Russian, if you like. My heritage was Kovna in Lithuania and Russia on my father's side, and I've waited 40 years to do a Chekhov, and I've never been so happy. We got shut on from a great height by the critics, but I've never felt so completely at home and wanting to do Chekhov for the rest of my life, because that is the perfect fusion of the Jewish sensibility, the Russian melancholy, the literacy of a good man, the humanity of him, and above all, the comedy of life, the twist, and the twist of the lemon peel at the end. And it was a fantastic experience. I just played Charlotta with my dog, who had a nervous breakdown halfway through the run and had to be put into the priory with Amy Winehouse's lurcher, And it was just a great experience, and I would travel anywhere to play Chekhov again. But I think that so long as I'm seen as a Jewish actress, then I won't get those parts.
Well, no, that's what I want to ask you about, because when I look at the list of parts, you have been cast as specifically Jewish in a way that a lot of American actors haven't, for example. Now, sometimes it's inevitable, because, Jack's plays were often about being Jewish, but you have been cast in that way.
I think if you look down a list of everything, there would not be that much, but I do think that it was different pre-Beatty and post-Beatty, and that was because it was in your face every night, and it became a big sort of, editors of papers said, oh, we love that, get more about her. And then I started sort of saying, getting frightened and backtracking.
Well, I want to talk about that, because it is, you must have regrets about Beatty.
Well, I'm all right now, but at the time, I think if you haven't experienced real, in-your-face success, it's much harder to deal with than the general sort of low-level failure. You got a good review for that. Oh, I saw you in so-and-so. I've always sort of, I haven't flopped upwards. I have gone upwards. But to actually be in restaurants and having people going behind your back and complaining about their bills, and to actually be the face of a major corporation was a hell of a shock to a woman in midlife. And I think it just knocked me off. I'm very down to earth. I tend not to get big-headed. I am a bit arrogant in that I'm opinionated, but I think with that, first of all, I made 55 commercials in 2 years, which is unheard of, right? You make 4. But I was on some contract whereby I could make as many as they wanted me to. So they'd see the 8 and they'd say, well, we like 2 of them, but we'd like another 8. And I'd be back to... So that got to me a bit. And then, yes, it did change. I thought it was, suddenly it was like having Domestos written across my head. and it was scary. You do a commercial. I'd done one before, and it was on 5 times, and it was never... Who knew that it was going to be... the biggest thing I'd ever done. And nobody teaches you. It's just like bringing your baby home from the hospital. You look down and you think, they've left this with me. I don't know what to do. That's what fame is. They've left this with me and I don't know what to do. And it's a double-edged sword, like all good things.
I failed.
You didn't pass anything?
Pottery.
Pottery? Very useful. Anthony, people will always need plates. Anything else?
And sociology.
An ology? He gets an ology and he says he's failed. You get an ology, you're a scientist.
And when I look at the list of your early television credits, there's one appearance in The Lovers in 1970, which was Jack's, wasn't it? But is that where you met him?
No, I met him at Granada, had a little theatre set up called The Stables. We started with a company of about 20 actors. We had a little building just down the road from Granada Television. Granada Television was famously dry, and so it had a bar. It was very heady, exciting times in Manchester. We had Georgie Best in the bar. We had lots of lockups in pubs. It was buzzing in Manchester. This was from the north. This is Granada, it said. And that was very important to northerners, to have a somewhere that was deep, not centralised by London. So they were wonderful times to be young, to be in the 60s, to be wearing beads and bells and a perm and meeting Jack Rosenthal in a bar and thinking, that's it, that'll do. That's the one.
Did you think that straight away?
Yeah. Within a week. Absolutely, no question. And it took him a bit longer. But yeah, that was it. It was kismet.
I was looking back, when you look at his work, I mean, I can say this, you can't say this. I don't think there's ever been a sustained feat of writing for television as what happened in the mid-70s. With him, there's play after play after play. Ready When You Are, Mr. McGill, The Evacuees, Spend. Bar Mitzvah Boy, The Knowledge. I mean, they were winning the BAFTA award every year, which no one has ever done since. But you were in some of those. Did you ever worry about becoming the writer's wife?
Well, it's a dull woman who sleeps with the writer, isn't it?
That's the old Hollywood joke, isn't it? Yeah.
Did you hear about the actress who, yeah, the
He
blonde
was so
that
stupid that she slept with a writer.
People don't like husband and wife teams, generally. There's something innately smug about it, which I was aware of. I was only in the Knowledge and The Evacuees, and then and The Lovers. I had a small part in one episode. And then years went by when I didn't do anything, and then I was in Eskimo, and he wrote Bag Lady for me, which he considered was his best play, and which was, there was a certain amount of schadenfreude about winning the BAFTA 3 years running, I think, from the profession.
You were in Something by Another Writer at one point when Jack was still alive, and they said, ooh, she keeps changing the lines, and that's Jack. He's secretly writing them at home. And people used to say that, didn't they? They used to think you were...
Well, sometimes it was openly, right? Sometimes, I mean, it was... Mostly that was just agony. Believe me, it happens a lot. It's not actors' arrogance. It's wanting the thing to be right. It's certainly something like The Pianist. You know, you did not cross Roman Polanski. You rehearsed it. You knew every inflection you were going to give, you knew the tone of voice you were going to use, and you didn't vary from it. And you had this extraordinary film which all felt, as if it was a ghetto. And certainly one of the things I will always owe to Polanski is the fact that he made me, through fear, extremely still. And that's why it's a good performance from me, that I'm not allowed to do any of my little things that that are, I suppose, mannerisms that we all have, which come from us. I have a lot of respect for Roman Polanski, don't get me wrong. He made a brilliant film. It was mostly brilliant because it was unsentimental and it didn't make the Jews into the heroes or anyone into a hero. It was about the randomness of war. But there were some occasions where you had to laugh. And there was no laughing allowed. So that was tough for me.
What were the occasions you had to laugh?
Well, I'll tell you one little story, which is a favourite. And that is that there's a scene where I was bringing in my, 33rd bowl of chicken soup to a kitchen. And I had to say, and please for once, let us not have any arguments. Let us have a nice Friday night. Frank Finlay, who I've worked with quite a lot, who I knew in the old days at the Old Vic, and I love Frank. And he's very sort of Mount Rushmore, right? So he's very stolid. And Roman loved him because he reminded him of his father. And Frank was at the end of the table, and he was very sunk in his own world. And the boys and the girls, the boys were opposite and the girls, so a family of 4, put down the chicken soup and say, and please for once. Roman was behind the camera, and he stopped it. Yeah, what the hell is going... one of those. He wanted to see the costume lady. She wasn't there that day. He didn't like the way Frank looked. He wanted him dirtier. He wanted him more distressed. She wasn't there. She'd gone off buying. She'd left everything for us, and we'd all... So there was a mighty hiatus while he got quite angry, and the studio, hundreds of people, was silent in Poland. And we all just sat there and nobody said anything. And he suddenly said, bring me sandpaper. Right? And then somebody brought him a sheet of sandpaper. He ripped it in half. He knelt down by the side of Frank Finlay and he sandpapered him for about 10 minutes in a silent studio. Right, now you can't laugh and you can't speak, so you just sit there. And if you were to catch his eye, it wouldn't go down well.
And what did Frank Finley? He just sat there
Frank,
impassive.
that was what was funny, was that Frank just sat there while he was sandpapered. And then, all right, it was ready, everything was looking good. And out, studio, stand by, action, and I go back, I get another bowl of chicken soup. I come in and I sit down, I'm a bit wobbly by now. This is about the 4th time I've come in with it, and I put it down. I said, and please, for once, can we not have any arguments or discussions? This is a Friday night. Stop! He looked like he'd come from Savile Row. Right, silence on the set. I go into the kitchen, and I'm now... Right. He says, and I'm not kidding you, he says, bring me the German sausage I had for lunch. Now, nobody knows what he's going to do with that sausage, least of all Frank. Up comes a plate with a big, thick German sausage like that, like a U-shape. Frank's eyes are like this. Roman gets the sausage, he breaks it in half, and he kneels down beside Frank Finley, distinguished actor, and he sausages him all over. Like this. Rubbing him with his sausage. And Frank sits there. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't bat his eyes. He just sits there, and it's the end of me. I'm in another. I'm on the planet Zog, right? And if he looks round and sees me, I'm dead, right? So now he's finished. Now he looks like if he went outside, a dog would eat him, right? So now I get back outside. I think, please God, don't let me laugh. Make me stop now. Because I've got tears pouring down my makeup. I come in with the chicken soup. I say, and please, for once, can we not have any arguments? And I get through it somehow. And when Frank takes his spoonful of soup, he's like this. And it is my contention that whole performance from Polanski was to get Frank Finlay, great actor, to do that. Please, tonight, for once, I don't want anything bad talked about. Enjoy our meal.
Fine. Then I'll tell you something funny. You all know who I mean by Dr. Richea?
The surgeon.
The surgeon. Well, for some reason, don't ask me why, the Germans allowed him into the ghetto to perform an operation.
On a Jew? They allowed a Pole to come in to operate on a Jew.
He got a pass, that's all I know. Anyway, so he puts the patient to sleep and starts the operation. He's just made the first incision when the SS burst in, shoot the patient lying on the table, then shoot Dr. Richea and everybody else who was there. Isn't that a laugh? The patient didn't feel a thing. He was anesthetized.
I said nothing bad, Henrik.
What's the matter with you all, huh? Huh?
Part of your ability to tell stories like that, you started a writing career in the early 80s. Options magazine, I think, was the first to approach you. How did it come about?
I think it was through a friend of mine called Linda Agren. What happened was we were going to write something together, and then she sort of just didn't, and I carried on. And I think I met Sally O'Sullivan, the editor, at that same time, and we decided that I would try to write a monthly column. And, Jack always believed that everybody had a book in them or a story in them, or certainly if you can write the way you talk, then it will work. And I just wrote the way I talk. And I'd update my sort of personal life and career to match the columns. And that's what I'll be doing again with the next one. I haven't done a book for 7 years, apart from finishing Jack's book and the Gibbon book.
And from early on, you went for rather suggestive titles. Something to Fall Back On. How was it for you? My favourite, When's It Coming Out? That was just a kind of a pattern you got into.
How was it for you? Which is just one of those... I love phrases that just evolve, and the sort of colloquialisms. When people say things like, this is it. Always made me laugh when they say that. When, this which one that there is now, which is nice. And there's always these funny little phrases that we seem to need.
Don't go there, that people just pick up.
No problem. Don't go there, no way. And then when it's funny is when it gets into the body, when it gets into sort of middle-aged women in post office saying, don't hassle me, which was a 60s word, And this one, past it notes, came because I wanted to have a picture of me very close up, unbotoxed. And I see many of my friends have all got this sort of slightly sweet hamster look about them these days. And I wanted to actually show the lines and the bags and the crow's feet and everything. And I wanted to call it Earning My Lines. Because the question most asked to any actor is, oh, how do you learn your lines? Which is like, you know, until you reach a certain age, you don't even consider it. You just learn them by osmosis, you know. So Earning My Lines it was going to be, which is not suggestive, really. It's just a double meaning.
Well, one of the books gets very dark at one point because we've had the triumph of Rejoice, which was a big success for you. One-woman show about an entertainer who even then was beginning to be forgotten. What was it about her that made you want to bring her back in that way?
I felt like her. A big, gawky, funny, you know, observer. Funny bones, very, very delineated performances. Because, of course, I'd only ever seen her on film. So, you know, we got all that sort of, you know, lumpy latter. And I just always knew how she ticked, even though we couldn't have been born under more different circumstances. As I said in the show, her with a silver spoon in her mouth and certainly not one with any chicken soup on it. So, and I just loved her, you know, I loved what she'd written and I wanted the big sketches to be in there as opposed to just George. You know, I just didn't want it to be that. And it was joyful, lovely.
I say, you do look rather bleak. Would you like to band together a little? All 5 of you. Well, as you can see, not the ideal circumstances for auditioning, with the heat wave and, of course, the lights, or lack of it. Oh, I say, thank you. And as you can see, dear Stu Ross has very kindly agreed to play for me at short notice. And we will begin, I think, with a typically English ditty, courtesy of Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Come into the garden, Maud. I am here at the gate alone. I am here at the gate alone.
Maud won't come into the garden. Maud is compelled to state. Though you stand for hours and among the flowers down by the garden gate, Maud won't come into the garden, sing to her as you may. Maud says she begs your pardon, but she wasn't born yesterday.
You do a gala performance in 1994, I think Manchester, and you say, I thought this might be the last time I ever went on a stage, but you'd been diagnosed with a tumour in your spine. So that was a grim period, that.
Yeah, everybody gets theirs, don't they, really? I mean, there's this curious sense of relief when you've always imagined the finger, you know, was going to come and point at you, and then suddenly you're not got the, you know, the person with the perfect kids and the wonderful husband and the family at home and the mother and you know, you're not short of a bob or two, and suddenly you're out there with the rest of society and you've got a lump in your neck, and it's a benign tumour, but nonetheless a tumour wrapped around the nerves. So the thing was that I would have either a club hand, a numb hand, a dead hand, all these words that didn't go with, you know, gesticulating. So it was something of a miracle that I was operated on first, and they got it partially because they didn't want to make me have and then it came back. So yeah, I mean, life is never just the bowl of cherries that Hello magazine would like you to think it is. But in my case, I just think I've been exceptionally lucky. I've always worked, I know, I've got this great couple of kids who are just people I like, who seem to like me, you know, and that's the good stuff. And then, you know, Jack's illness, Jack's death, and Zelma's, and the death of, you know, lots of friends had to do with being 62. So I don't think to myself, you know, oh gosh, it's, you know, this is retribution from on high. I just think that how you cope with problems is a mark of what you are, and what you are actually is a bunch of genes inherited from your mum and dad, and it's all too easy to sit through 30 years of psychotherapy like Woody Allen and, you know, come out with a rational reason for being frightened of trees. But, you know, in my case, I now understand that you just do your best you can. You know, you bring them up the best you can. You're going to fail. They're bound to reject you in some way. Your career is bound to peak and then go into a trough. People are bound to get fed up just of your face. You just do the best you can. And that's you know, I can hang my hat up and say, you know, perhaps I've worked too much. Perhaps I've been a bit sort of narcissistic and, you know, a bit of a show-off. I mean, I can say I know what's wrong with me, but in the great scheme of things, I think that this business has been exactly what I was destined to do. And I think that the best part of it is that some of what I've been able to do is actually therapeutic. And there's one piece of advice which has meant a lot to me, which is the last page of Agnes de Mille's autobiography, the great choreographer, never satisfied with her own work. And she complained once to Martha Graham, the great doyenne of choreographers. Agnes said, "Oh God, I only ever see the faults." And Martha rounded on her and she said, "It is not your business to judge what is right or wrong in a performance. You have only one thing to do in life, and that is to keep the channel open." She said, "Because there is a vitality, a life force in you, which is quintessentially you. And if you block that channel by judging yourself, it will never exist in any form, and the world will be deprived of it." So Agnes says, "But then there's no satisfaction." She says, "No satisfaction ever, at any time, only a queer, divine dissatisfaction, which marks us out and makes us different from the rest." I just think that says it, really. It's not our business. It's maybe your business to judge me, but it's not my business to judge me. And if I do, then I'm going to be blocking the most amazing possibilities, you know, which make this business so much better than any other business if you work.
And the range of stuff you've done, because it goes from a lot of comedy, The Pianist, very serious, Oklahoma, writing. Is that deliberate? Was that policy to do as many different things as possible?
Well, the actors who I love and whom I admire are the ones who do something different all the time. But I mean, that's not to say that I don't love Cary Grant. But I think they're film stars. I think actors are people who should be able to change. And I don't want to go and see a performance where I know what's coming. I want to be shocked and surprised. I would never want to repeat a performance. The one performance in Outside Edge, Richard Harris's Outside Edge, where she was this sort of strange bricklaying hippie and quite sort of, "Oh, wait till I get him home, you know, I'm giving such a scene to when I get him home." That sort of character. I loved playing her. And I didn't want to let her go, and I didn't want to let Joyce go because she made me feel so good, such a good person. Because, you know, one was always looking on the bright side, really, and taking a good point of view and expecting good in other people. And then Florence Foster Jenkins, of course, learning to sing horrendously badly.
We should explain for people who didn't see it. This is a play called Glorious, in which you played the worst, by all records really, the worst opera singer of all time.
Yeah. And that was a very good learning experience, and it's all really about learning this, in that I had to learn to sing it properly before I could sing it badly. And I had to go further than I had dreamt. And actually, I very rarely read the critics, but one of the critics had said, the trouble is that the actual singing isn't funny enough. And he was right. And because I didn't want to send her up, because I loved her. She was a mad philanthropist, you know, quite insane, really. I mean, she had something called A Musica, I think it is, where she heard herself as singing beautifully, and she heard Galli-Curci as sing, you know. So, but I actually had to go even further than she did, because this sort of a man like you, a marquee too. You really should be. And you couldn't go far enough, because when you hear her sing, it's just so sad.
Therefore my advice is that you look twice when judging those you meet. My little white hand so fine.
What I want to finish with is that we've established that you're someone that things happen to. And one of them, you were banned. You're banned for a year from Woking Shopping Centre.
Stop. Hear my big mouth. One of the wonderful additions to my life, apart from obviously the things I've mentioned and the dear friends and more than friends, is Diva, the Basenji dog, the barkless dog of the Congo, who's come into my life along with Warren, the magic performing rabbit. And I was going to do a performance in Woking at the theatre there, which in itself is a mistake. And to park your car, I was with an assistant of mine, Nats, and to park your car, you have to park it beneath the Woking Shopping Centre and walk through the centre to get to the theatre. So I was walking through the shopping centre, little barkless dog on a lead, just going to the stage door, which is in the shopping centre. And it was, a job's worth with a walkie-talkie. Excuse me, madam, you cannot come through here with a dog. I said, well, I'm really not coming through here. I'm not shopping. You understand? I'm going to the theatre. It's not my concern where you are going, madam. You cannot bring a dog in the shopping centre. I said, well, look, I can't. Where would you suggest I go to get from here to the stage door? I'm on in a show in an hour's time. It is not my business what you are doing this afternoon. You cannot come. So I'm afraid I told him. And I said, I'm walking through. This is a mistake, Two abusive women in a shopping centre at Woking. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Two abusive, their language is foul. So now he's seeing my retreating back, and he says, you are banned from Woking Shopping Centre for the period of 1 year. This is the witch man. I fell to my knees and said, oh no, God, please don't ban me from Woking Shopping Centre. Anything but that, anything. Please, make it 2 years. What's second prize, I say. So I am, in fact, I'm an ASBOS. Is it called ASBOS?
Asbo.
ASBO, yeah, on Woking. Tough, it's tough at the top.
Maureen Lipman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Maureen Lipman stars in a drama written by her late husband in a few moments here on BBC4. Eskimo Day is next. And Mark Lawson is back with another brand new interview next Sunday evening when we're celebrating the work of the great John Mortimer.